Hey, welcome back to Healed Whole Call. Today's conversation is for those who hold everything together. The caregiver who manages appointments, medications, crises, and still tries to show up steady for everyone else. I'm joined by Michelle Anderson, who delightfully woke up early in the morning from Australia. It's 4 a.m. there, guys. Like, what? Who does that? Somebody who wants to talk to us. So, founder of J&B Inspired, of the host of Radiant Movement's Caregiver Oasis. For 14 years, she has cared for neurodivergent and medically complex family members while also walking through her own major surgeries and recovery. Michelle understands caregiving as more than a role. She understands the exhaustion and advocacy in the invisible weight. And she helps caregivers regulate, find their voice, and hold on to their identity. So if you've ever felt stretched thin, unseen, while caring for others, this conversation's for you. Michelle, so grateful to have you with us.
Thank you so much, Wendy. It's wonderful to be here. I'm very excited and very early in the morning, so I'm right, ready and raring.
Yeah, that's so awesome. So I'd love for you to look back over the last 14 years of caregiving. What has felt the most defining about that journey for you?
I guess for the first, there's probably 3 moments that are kind of defining for me in that period of time. The first was probably the realization that caregiving wasn't a short season. It was becoming like a long-term reality. As you said, I've been caregiving for about 15 years now, supporting neurodivergent individuals and walking complex medical journeys with both of my children. And I learned very quickly that caregiving isn't just tasks, it's the mental load, the emotional steadiness, and the constant adapting when life kept changing. Probably the second moment was when I was actually in hard rooms. What I mean by that is like medical appointments, hospital emergency rooms, hospital stays where we're there for extended times, school meetings, and service-based systems like occupational therapy, speech therapy, anything where you're having to do regular engaged work where you have to advocate. And recognizing I had to find my voice. I became the advocate, I became a translator, and the one having to like hold all of the details in my brain and pushing for clarity when things were really uncertain. That's when my message started to form that caregivers need more encouragement. They need support that's practical, safe, and sustainable. And if I think about it, probably the third part is for me more personally. Over the last 3 years, like I've lived both sides. I've been the caregiver, but I've also been the patient. And I think through those major surgeries and my recovery, that gave me a deeper trauma-aware lens and a stronger conviction to build what I wish would have existed for me when I first started out as a caregiver, a sanctuary where being a caregiver you can feel seen, heard, steadied, and supported. I really needed a space where I wasn't judged, wasn't rushed, and I wasn't carrying it all alone. And at that time, that's how I felt. So they're probably the 3 things that really defined why I created J&B Inspired and Radiant Moments, and kind of what led to having this lived experience that I can then support others in. So, yeah.
That's awesome. So what is something about caregiving that people on the outside rarely see or fully understand?
It's probably the mental load, the thousands of tiny little tasks, the tiny little things that we have to keep monitoring, make sure that we're staying on top of. It's not the big moments where we're in an emergency room. It's the managing 20 different personalities in that room effectively, whilst managing how they deliver information, the way they address a patient or the parent or the caregiver, and then being able to seamlessly coordinate and integrate all of the different aspects of the person's care, because not everybody talks. It's very fragmented. You want to make sure that we're keeping on top of all of those things. Medications, if there's any like contraindications from renal to gastroenterology, to make sure that our loved one is being cared for at the highest level. And it's also the hypervigilance, the being totally aware of everybody in our surroundings, because in a split second, our loved one could be needing immediate medical assistance. They could be requiring emergency medications for seizures, or maybe they've pulled out their gastroenterology button and you've got to make sure that you can stop it going up into their lungs and aspirating, covering it, doing all of the steps. So it's also about learning things that you would never in your wildest dreams could have thought that you would be doing. Changing nasogastric tubes, learning how to properly care for trachs, any type of gastroenterology, buttons for feeding. There are just things that in your wildest dreams you would never have thought that you would be doing. And, at first you probably were terrified, didn't know, couldn't do it, that's out of my scope. And then you realize the impact and the trauma kind of experienced by your loved ones from the process of medical professionals who don't do it every day, taking too long to reinsert a button, not doing the right thing, pinning your child. So it then becomes this immediate need to step in for your loved one and learn so that you can do it effectively, efficiently, and with as little trauma as possible. And, there's probably a turning point, which wasn't dramatic. It was just slow. And it was an honest understanding that love alone doesn't protect our nervous system and it doesn't make it sustainable. And I needed a different way to live inside caregiving that also included me. And that's something that's missing dramatically in medical care, is that the caregiver is not seen as part of the care team. They're just seen as someone coming along. And it's very refreshing to find a medical professional who'll see you as just as important as the care of the patient, because if you fall over, who's going to pick up the pieces?
Right.
So that's probably the things that are not seen from like the outside. There's also like the self-regulation, the tiny resets that are needed, the boundaries that you feel guilty about putting in place, and also the support that fits real life. And those are kind of multi-blocks and layers that kind of make up caregiving as a profession. But most of us are actually not professional caregivers. We've stepped into these roles unexpectedly. We weren't expecting to have a child born with additional medical needs. We weren't given an encyclopedia or a dictionary of how to do these things. And it's on our shoulders to learn and to educate ourselves and to, at times, be more knowledgeable than the doctors that you're seeing about the condition that your loved one has. And it's what shaped the heart, really. This process of not having the support, and that adds more tasks and more expectations on a caregiver's shoulder, to why I'm building the spaces that I'm building, so that they can have tools that they see, they feel seen, they feel heard, steady and supported, so that they can keep showing up as the best versions of themselves without losing who they are, their goals, their dreams, and their wants along the way.
Well, there's a couple different things I'd like to ask. Well, first will be what ways, so let's just say that this is sprung upon a family, right? It's not often that we plan that all of a sudden this is going to take a turn in our lives and we're going to be in the caregiver role. It's usually popped in our laps as an unexpected event. What are some ways that people could support themselves before it gets too overwhelming and they end up having to kind of backpedal or say, just take care of themselves? You know how it is. It's always easier to know, hey, what do I need to do to support myself if this happens, versus, okay, now I'm in this mess. I've been in this for several months and I'm super burnout. I'm not taking care of myself properly. Now my health is suffering. So then they have to rewind a little bit. So is there some things that can help people can put into their knowledge box? Like, hey, if this happens, remember to do X, Y, Z.
I think the most important thing for a caregiver is to know that their voice is just as important as a medical professional's voice in the space. A lot of times we walk in, and because a doctor has years of experience, they have years of knowledge, we expect that they will have the answers. And I think to come in as that they are the same and equal to us, they might never have seen this medical diagnosis, this medical condition, or the way that they're presented. So first and foremost, it's about knowing how to self-regulate, knowing how to, let me just, I guess, paint a little picture. So your loved one has a fall. They've got a broken arm. They're rushed to the emergency room from school. This is your first ever experience of having to deal with an emergency department. The noises, the sounds, the uncertainty, the worry that your child is not okay. They're in pain, they're crying, they're screaming, they're scared. Everything is going. And in that moment, our body goes into fight, flight, freeze, or fawn mode. And our brain goes offline. We don't register what's being told to us, because even though we're hearing the words, our brain is offline. So one of the most important things that could support you is learning very small, short, private skills on how to bring our brain back online, so that we can recognize that we're not being chased by a saber-toothed tiger, and that we are in control in the room. That has nothing to do with us personally. It's just our nervous system is in, how do I protect my child? How do I protect my loved one? And 90 seconds is all it takes to bring you back online. That can be through box breathing. It can be through grounding, where you're focused on something like the texture of a curtain or your shirt. It can be around centering so that you can refocus, taking 2 or 3 steps to bring you back online. 90 seconds of breathing helps regulate your vagus nerve, brings your heart rate down. You stop breathing into the top of your chest, and then you're able to have more cognitive awareness in the space. You're able to advocate more effectively, and it also helps to prevent the crash after you've come out. So everything's fixed, you feel fine, you sit in the car, or you finally get home, your child goes and rests, and you break down. It was so overwhelming, and it's those tiny little steps that set us up for success in the long term. Because if we can regulate our nervous system, then we don't have cortisol and adrenaline running through our system. And so that's probably like the first stepping stone, is how to regulate in 90 seconds. It doesn't have to be perfect, just so that you can be the best advocate and have the least impact on your nervous system long term. Because I believe, based on the research, it's like 60% of caregivers have a shortened lifespan due to the level of cortisol and adrenaline that they're constantly in. So it's a really important skill to develop if you're starting out on this journey, and then even adopt if you've been there for a while.
So then let's just say there has been numerous times, since this happens in the US, I'm not sure about Australia, I'm assuming it happens there too, where as a caregiver you need to pull your loved one from the system and place them in different care. Because you are the voice, you are the advocate, you're seeing there's mismanagement of their health or their systems or whatever, because they're, let's just say they're only thinking in this box, but they need help from this box. And the only way to get this box is to move them from this box to this box. And that requires checking them out and moving them. So do you have any, like, one of the best things that I learned is no is a complete sentence. And you still have the authority and power to do whatever you want, not the doctors. So have you happened to go through any of that, or do you know how to help someone to feel empowered? Because it's almost like, the more situations we go through in life, the more we become a lion and not a sacrificial lamb to the system. So I didn't know if you had any thoughts about that.
Yes, well, here in Australia, we've had a few situations where, particularly with young children, where the action hasn't been taken and a child has lost their life. Because even though the parent has advocated, has said something is wrong, the medical professionals have ignored them because there may be a question of, are they actually here doing in the best interest of the child? Or there's like one incident and there's a knee-jerk reaction, and then all communication kind of breaks down. Here in Australia, we now have very specific supports in place, and you can make a phone call and a completely new team will come in and assess everything in the hope that this prevents any further unnecessary harm to the patient or to the process as well, if you don't feel like there's appropriate action being taken. And I believe there's also this system in the United States as well, particularly in pediatric care, because in Australia, a lot of our hospitals, we are learning hospitals. So we support young doctors coming in through their residency, and not everybody has the same knowledge. And they don't understand, and you don't get to see the consultant. So you see all of the junior staff, they go away and they provide all of the information, and then they come back. Firsthand, I've experienced where they don't pass on the information accurately or correctly, and that can have a massive impact. So it's really important to know, as the caregiver, being a part of the care plan means that you have a voice, that you are the authority in your loved one. That's really important to know, that just because a medical professional has a doctorate does not mean that they have the lived experience, they don't have the lived knowledge, and they don't have the 24-hour picture. So they have to rely on us as caregivers. And that's where, coming in equipped with evidence, with photos, videos of what's happening for you is really important to have that knowledge. But at the end of the day, if the treatment is not correct, if harm is being caused, or you are concerned that they are missing a big ticket item, you have every right to seek a second opinion, every right to have them advocated for. And generally, that should be supported by the hospital or the medical facility that you're in, especially if you come to a point where you're not working well. Like, the teams are not listening, they're not taking on the holistic view of the patient, and their actions may actually negatively impact the patient if they're not considering all of the medications and treatment plans that are in place. And most of the time, if you have a complex case where your child or your loved one has multiple comorbid conditions, this is really important. And being the advocate means that you have to organize these multidisciplinary meetings, which are really hard to coordinate to get everybody in the same place. Or you might get a couple of them and then you have to bring others in, and being the person who has to pass on that information is a really tough space to be in, and it can be very overwhelming at times. I'm a huge advocate for saying, I just need to take a moment because I need to take some notes here, especially if you're feeling overwhelmed or you don't think you're taking all of the information in at once. That's a really calm way of being able to regulate in a moment. When you say, I'm taking notes, that generally makes them pause.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. They're taking notes and they're going to be able to come back and rely on this, because there has been a number of occasions where I've spoken to caregivers who have found that the way a nurse, a medical registrar, or even the consultant has written notes and incorrectly written notes, because they're seeing so many patients and sometimes that's wrong. So it's really important to have all of the knowledge that's come in and ask the questions. And even if, they walk away and you're like, oh, I should have asked this, why didn't I ask that? You can always ask them to come back. You can write down your questions and say, when they finish rounds, I need them to come back. I've forgotten about X, Y, and Z. And it's the role of the nursing staff or the social worker to help you to make sure that all of your questions are answered before action is taken.
That's good. And I'm wondering if there's even a way that we could even like so many times in my meetings, I voice record everything, right? I think so I have note takers just so I can be present and focused because even when we're writing something down and listening, we could be missing what they're saying next by writing down the previous thing. So it could be a way that we could just pull up our note takers, our AI note takers, and just say, hey, like I'm recording it I mean, some states and countries, you have to tell them they're recording. It's not about finding defamation lawsuit information. It's about making, hey, I want to pay attention. I want to focus, right? So I'd love for you to share what would you say to the caregiver listening right now who feels exhausted, maybe even invisible, and is wondering how much longer they can keep doing this?
That's such a beautiful question to ask, particularly because when we're a caregiver and we are exhausted and tired, most of the time we don't recognize that we're moving towards burnout and that we're actually pushing our body past the point that we actually are able to stop and recover, and we feel exhausted in that space.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess what I'd love a caregiver to take away and understand is I'd like them to tell them gently that they're not failing, that you're carrying too much and it goes on for too long. And of course, you feel like you're disappearing, and you're allowed to be a part of the care team, not just the person keeping everyone else afloat. And you don't have to find yourself in one big brave moment. You can come back to yourself in tiny ones by starting with one single breath where you let your shoulders drop, creating boundaries that support you and show that I matter too. And one small ask for help this week is really a space that is hard for caregivers. And even if it's just tiny, 90-second counts. And I want them to hear that they're not gone. They're still in there. They've been in survival mode for so long that they've had to put themselves on the back burner, but they can pick themselves back up piece by piece so that they can still have softness, joy, and a future version of themselves that isn't just wholly centered around caregiving and being the caregiver. And it can start in the smallest, kindest choices for today. And that's how we can help prevent burnout and long-term impacts for caregivers.
That's awesome. So if anyone really loves how like you're leading people and they want to get connected with you, what's the best way for them to do that?
They can find me on Radiant Moment Caregiver Oasis on most platforms for podcasts. They can also reach me at jmbinspired.com or reach out at letstalk@jmbinspired.com if they'd like to send me an email. We have lots of wonderful free resources to help them get started and feel supported, and a beautiful community that means that they are seen, heard, and supported.
That is so awesome. Well, thank you so much for honoring caregivers with your steadiness and wisdom, and for reminding us that strength doesn't mean silence, and love doesn't require losing yourself. So to the caregiver listening today, your role is significant, but it is not your whole identity. You're not just the one who manages the details. You're the whole person, seen by God, worthy of care and deserving of support. If this conversation resonated with you today, share it with another caregiver who needs to feel less alone. And as always, if this episode met you in a tender place, we invite you to sit and pray through it and take one small step towards support this week. Remember, this is Healed Whole Call, and your story is not ending in exhaustion. It is moving towards wholeness. Till next time.